Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Chicago-born Elias Rodriguez is charged with first-degree murder after allegedly killing 2 Israeli embassy staff in D.C. in what officials call an anti-Semitic attack. Prosecutors say he opened fire outside a Jewish event attended by diplomats and young professionals. Homeland Chief Kristi Noem terminates Harvard's student visa program, accusing the university of anti-Semitism and Chinese Communist Party ties. Harvard calls the move illegal and vows to defend its foreign students, as Noem warns other universities may be next. Israel allows limited aid into Gaza for the first time in weeks, but Palestinian officials say it's nowhere near enough as starvation looms and looting fears grow. Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes kill at least 50 people as Netanyahu signals no hold to the war unless hostages are all returned. Trump and Netanyahu speak on Iran while U.S. envoy Witkoff heads to Rome for nuclear talks. Washington insists on a total uranium enrichment ban, but Iran's Khamenei calls the demands excessive and casts doubt on any deal. Israel says it shot down 2 missiles fired by Yemen's Houthis, triggering sirens nationwide, including in Jerusalem and the West Bank. The Houthis claim they targeted Ben Gurion Airport and Tel Aviv with missiles and drones in a fresh escalation. A man is found dead in a flooded car as torrential rains batter southeast Australia, raising the death toll to 4. Nearly 50,000 people remain stranded as floods disrupt trains, flights, and whole towns across Sydney. A small plane has slammed into a military housing area in San Diego early Thursday, killing 2 and injuring 8. While damaging homes and cars, the crash hit Terrence Central neighborhood just east of Montgomery, Gibbs Airport around 3:45 a.m. local time. The WHO says Gaza's health system is near collapse amid Israel's escalating military strikes, mass displacement, and severe shortages. 4 hospitals have shut down, services and medical admissions to key facilities have been blocked by ongoing conflict. A Chicago man has been arrested and charged with first-degree murder shooting of Israeli embassy employees in Washington, D.C. Rodriguez, who claimed responsibility for the killings, told police he acted for Palestine and was heard chanting "Free Palestine" after his arrest. Federal prosecutors have described the case as death penalty eligible, condemning the attack as an act of anti-Semitism. Interim U.S. Attorney Jenny Pirro addressed the severity of the case as she stated that her office is investigating the shooting as a hate crime and the crime of terrorism in a news briefing. Let's listen in to what she said.
21-year-old Elias Rodriguez of Chicago, Illinois, is now charged by complaint after his initial appearance before U.S. Magistrate Judge Matthew Sharbaugh with the following: murder in the first degree for the murder of 30-year-old Yaron Levshinsky, a foreign official and official guest of the United States. Mr. Levshinsky was here on official business for the State of Israel. The defendant Rodriguez is also charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree for both Yaron Levshinsky along with 26-year-old Sarah Lynn Milgram of Kansas. In addition, there are several felony firearms charges for discharging a firearm in the middle of a violent crime and for causing the death of an individual through the use of that firearm.
The White House press secretary also shared the administration's deep sorrow and outrage over the tragic killings. She echoed President Trump's sentiments, reaffirming that the full force of the law would be brought to bear on the perpetrator. Let's listen to what she had to say.
The evil of anti-Semitism must be eradicated from our society. I spoke to the Attorney General this morning. The Department of Justice will be prosecuting the perpetrator responsible for this to the fullest extent of the law. Hatred has no place in the United States of America under President Donald Trump. Everyone here at the White House is praying for the victims' friends and families during this unimaginable time.
Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed being devastated and appalled by the tragic killing of 2 Israeli embassy staff members in Washington. Meanwhile, Qatar, a key mediator in the Israel-Hamas conflict, has also condemned the attack. In a statement, the Qatari Foreign Ministry denounced the shooting outside of the Jewish Museum. The ministry extended the state's condolences to the victims' families and reaffirmed Qatar's rejection of any violence in all its forms. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has strongly condemned the horrific killing. Netanyahu also took the opportunity to thank President Trump for his unwavering support of Israel in the wake of this tragedy. The Trump administration has revoked Harvard University's right to enroll foreign students, affecting over a quarter of its annual intake and escalating tensions with the prestigious Ivy League institution. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced the immediate withdrawal of Harvard Student Exchange Visitor Program certification, the system permitting international students to study in the U.S. This move follows Harvard's refusal to comply with government demands for oversight on admissions and hiring amid President Trump's accusations that the university fosters anti-Semitism, supports pro-Hamas views, and promotes divisive woke policies. Trump had previously warned of such action if Harvard resisted government supervision. Harvard enrolled more than 27% of foreign students in the 2024 to 2025 academic year. Noem stated that maintaining foreign student enrollment is a privilege contingent on compliance with Department of Homeland Security regulations. Harvard has yet to respond to requests for comment. Meanwhile, Kristi Noem says the Trump administration is considering similar actions against other universities after blocking Harvard from enrolling foreign students. She made the remarks in a Fox News interview, signaling a broader crackdown on institutions resisting federal oversight. Multiple deaths have been reported following a fiery plane crash in a San Diego neighborhood, with at least 6 fatalities reported. Through the exact same toll has not been confirmed. A Cessna 550 has crashed into the residential area, causing massive destruction. Debris from the wreckage hit at least 10 homes, while vehicles lining the street were engulfed in flames. The crash, which occurred in a neighborhood home to military families, sent burning jet fuel across the area. San Diego Fire Department Assistant Chief Dan Eddy reported that one house had been severely damaged, but fortunately no one on the ground suffered serious injuries. Authorities are still working to determine the full scope of this incident. Let's listen in to what he said further.
It's accurate that multiple people believe we have multiple fatalities. From what we've found so far on scene, we do believe we have multiple fatalities, but we're going to have to go through and take our time and ensure that exactly what we have.
Neighbors made a harrowing escape from flames early Thursday after a plane crashed into the Murphy Canyon military housing community. Residents rushed door to door. Local officials praised the community's swift response during this crisis. The cause of the crash remains under investigation. Let us listen in to what the Public Information Officer from the Emergency Services had to say.
Entonces, poquito antes de las 4 de la mañana fue cuando recibimos la llamada de lo que ocurrió aquí. Entonces, al llegar los bomberos, los rescatistas encontraron el impacto aquí de la avioneta en la casa y en varios vehículos aquí por la calle. Estaban todos en fuego, las llamas y el olor al combustible, como estás viendo ahorita.
The crash, which tragically claimed the lives of the music talent agent and several others on the flight, sent shockwaves through the neighborhood of U.S. Navy-owned housing. The impact caused a home to burst into flames, with half a dozen vehicles also igniting. Let us listen to a resident's account of what happened that night.
Yeah, at first I thought, I wasn't sure. The initial one, I'm like, is there a bomb? Something happened, and then there was one initially, and I'm like, is that a gunshot? And then once it just started happening one after another, there was about maybe 4 to 5 when I was upstairs. And by the time I came down here, I wasn't keeping count. You were just hearing random explosions. And now that I see it was the cars exploding.
U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is traveling to Rome today for the 5th round of talks with Iranian officials over Tehran's nuclear program. A source said Witkoff will be joined by State Department official Michael Anton, and the discussions is expected to start at 11 a.m. GMT. The talk will be both direct and indirect, comes amid tensions over uranium enrichment. Iran's top diplomat Araghchi said yesterday that deep divisions remain with the U.S. ahead of nuclear talks, warning no agreement is possible if Washington demands Iran halt uranium enrichment. Let's listen in to what Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said.
هنوز اختلافات بنیانی بین ما وجود داره. طرف آمریکایی همونطور که خودشون گفتن در مصاحبات و گفته‌هاشون اصولاً به غنیسازی در ایران اعتقادی ندارن و معتقدن که غنیسازی باید به طور کامل متوقف بشه. اگر این هدفشون هست، توافقی در کار نخواهد بود. من این رو به صراحت عرض میکنم. اگر بخواهند که حق مردم ایران برای استفاده صلح‌آمیز از انرژی هسته‌ای رو از ما بگیرن، ما به هیچ وجه توافقی نخواهیم داشت. جمهوری اسلامی ایران اگر می‌خواست سراغ سلاح هسته‌ای بره.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, with the White House saying negotiations with Iran are moving in the right direction. Witkoff reiterated that any deal must include a ban on uranium enrichment, a stand Tehran rejects. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Al-Khamenei called U.S. demands excessive and outrageous, expressing doubt over the success of these talks. The discussions followed the recent killing of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington. Listen to what White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt has said.
The President spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. They had a productive discussion. They discussed many things, including, of course, the tragic shooting that took place here in Washington, D.C. last night. But they also did talk about a potential deal with Iran, which the President believes is moving along in the right direction. And as the President told me, and he's told all of you, this deal with Iran could end in 2 ways. It could end in a very positive diplomatic solution, or it could end in a very negative situation for Iran. So that's why these talks are taking place later this week.
Now we have guest Professor Rohan Gunaratna joining us as an international security expert from Singapore. Professor, what are the main sticking points between the U.S. and Iran in these talks?
At this point, the Iranians and the Americans are willing to talk, but Iran is unwilling to stop its weaponization and enrichment program. And of course, the President Trump is determined to ensure that Iran does not gain access to a nuclear weapon. So it is very likely that these talks will protract, and it is also very likely that at some point Israel will strike Iran and dismantle its fissile and missile program. It is because Iran continues to support various threat entities in the region, especially Ansarullah of the Houthi movement in Yemen, that periodically conducts missile and drone strikes against Israel. So the situation is very sensitive at the moment, but I believe that the US engagement of Iran is the most important engagement, because unless there are talks, there will be no breakthrough in the current status quo.
You have kind of already touched down, but Professor, why is this 5th round in Rome considered very, very important?
It is because Donald Trump is very determined that Iran gives a commitment and that Iran sticks to that commitment. Trump is a very unpredictable leader, but again, he is very determined to ensure that there is no attack on Iran by Israel at this stage. So I believe that we all must give peace a chance.
And while we all hope that, do you think there can be a deal that will be reached while Trump continues to push a maximum pressure campaign?
Yes, certainly. It is only through dialogue and discussion there can be a final and a permanent solution. But if Iran is going to just protract these talks and not yield to the US thinking on this matter, which is to stop enrichment, to stop weaponization, then certainly Israel and the US or Israel unilaterally will strike Iran.
And according to you, Professor, what do you think is Iran's red line in these negotiations?
Iran wants to continue its nuclear capability. Iran's argument is Israel has nuclear weapons. Why can't we have nuclear weapons? So Iran's principal strategy is to build those capabilities. The American notes that, the Israelis know it even better. And of course, considering Iran's past sponsorship of threat actors, meaning including terrorist groups, governments around the world do not want a country like Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
And last but not least, how much of a role is Israel playing behind the scenes in shaping US policy over here?
Israel is the power in the Middle East. Israel has repeatedly demonstrated its capacity and capability to dominate the security landscape in the Middle East. And of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has built a very close relationship with US President Donald Trump. And that relationship is what is going to eventually determine the fate of Iran, whether Iran is going to be attacked or not.
And let me ask another one. What happens if these talks fail or stall? Are we looking at a possible military escalation over here?
Absolutely. There will be strikes not only against Iran's nuclear infrastructure, but also against its economic infrastructure, because Israel is aware that whatever strikes they conduct to disrupt, degrade, and dismantle Iran's fissile and missile capabilities, Iran will rebuild, and Israel will attack Iran in a way where it will not be able to reconstitute their nuclear program in the short term.
Thank you so much, Professor Rohan Gunartra, for joining us. You will stay with us as we move on to our next story. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency has said that Israeli strikes killed 16 people today across the territory. Meanwhile, for the first time in more than 2 months, humanitarian aid is trickling back into Gaza, but United Nations officials warned the limited supply is nowhere near enough to avert a deepening humanitarian catastrophe. Over 90 trucks carrying flour, baby supplements, and other basics entered southern Gaza, but the first aid delivery since Israel imposed a total blockade on March 2nd. Officials say more trucks are expected today, but aid agencies warn that volume and access remain insufficient. The United Nations says 80% of Gaza is now under evacuation orders or militarized zones, pushing millions into overcrowded shelters amid severe shortages of food, clean water, medicine, and fuel. The World Health Organization has said that Gaza's health system is at breaking point. The head of the World Health Organization made an emotional plea for Israel to show mercy, saying peace is in Israel's own interest. WHO officials report that only 19 of Gaza's 36 hospitals remain operational, most under extreme conditions. Multiple facilities have been struck or forced to shut down in recent days. Additionally, on the domestic front, protests are taking place in Tel Aviv, calling on the Israeli government to end the war in Gaza. The protesters are also calling for the release of hostages and elections to be held in Israel. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused the leaders of France, Britain, and Canada of emboldening Hamas by criticizing Israel's latest operations. Let's listen into his comments.
I could never understand how this simple truth evades the leaders of France, Britain, Canada, and others. They're now proposing to establish a Palestinian state and reward these murderers with the ultimate prize. Well, for 18 years, we had a de facto Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. And what did we get? Peace? No. We got the most savage slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. They want Israel to stand down and accept that Hamas's army of mass murderers will survive, rebuild, and repeat the October 7th massacre again and again and again, because that's what Hamas has vowed to do.
We have Professor Rohan Gunaratna as an international security expert joining us from Singapore. Professor, thank you for staying with us. And how significant is the aid that's entering Gaza, and why do aid agencies say it's not enough?
The Palestinian population in Gaza needs sustained supplies of aid, but the challenge is that a significant percentage of the aid is being taken by Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and by other terrorist groups that is entering Gaza. And that is why Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel was reluctant initially to send aid. But again, Western governments, especially Western governments and the UN in general, they want to make sure that the humanitarian support continues to the civilian population in Gaza, even though they are fully aware that these terrorist groups are taking a percentage of the humanitarian assistance. If there is no sustained supply of food, medicines, and other humanitarian assistance, then certainly the people of Gaza will suffer. Prime Minister Netanyahu is determined to dismantle the Hamas infrastructure, is determined to free its hostages, because Israel has all the right to fight for its hostages, because Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other groups entered Israel on October 7th and 8th, 2023, and took Israeli and foreign nationals as captive. So I believe that Netanyahu's main aim is to secure the release of those hostages by putting military pressure. And of course, at this point, the United Nations and especially Western governments want to ensure that both the hostages are released, but also the people are fed in Gaza.
Right. And according to you, Professor, what is the status of Gaza's health system, and can the World Health Organization's plea, does it have any effect?
Health system of Gaza has also been disrupted because of the war. But all this, the blame has to be taken by Hamas. So that is why it is so important for every Muslim leader, secular, religious, and other leaders to constantly urge Hamas to release the hostages. If hostages are not being released, and in this 21st century, no one should hold hostages of another nation. If they do that, certainly there will be military operations, and the first casualty of those operations are the civilians. So the civilians suffering in Gaza, Hamas and the sponsors of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the sponsors of those groups and of other terrorist groups, they have to take the responsibility. Israel is fighting for its survival, fighting for the release of its nationals. And
Thank
that
you,
is why
Professor. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Rohan Gunaratra. Thank you for sharing that insight. We have to move on to next story. U.S. trade negotiations are urging the European Union to make unilateral tariff reductions on U.S. goods, warning that without such concessions, progress is ongoing. Trade talks will be stalled. According to a report by the Financial Times, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer is reportedly preparing to tell European Trade Commissioner Markus Sefcovic that the EU's recent explanatory note does not meet US's expectations. Sources tell the Financial Times that the note shared as part of ongoing talks falls short of the criteria set by the US. While the European Union has been advocating for a jointly agreed framework to guide the negotiations, significant differences between the two sides remain, complicating this process. In March, the US imposed a 25% tariff on EU cars, steel, and aluminum, followed by a 20% tariff on other EU goods in April. The US later reduced the 20% rate by half, but set a deadline of July 8th for a more comprehensive tariff deal, allowing a 90-day window for talks to take shape. In response, the EU suspended its own retaliatory tariff plans on certain US goods and proposed eliminating tariffs on all industrial goods from both sides. As of now, neither the European Commission nor the US Trade Representative's office has commented on the latest developments. We move on to Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country is ready to hold the next round of talks to end the war as soon as possible, but adds that Russia lacks a similar level of readiness. Also, Zelensky announced that he held a meeting to prepare for a 4,000 prisoner exchange with Russia. Let's listen in to what Zelensky had to say regarding future talks to end the conflict with Russia.
Також ми обговорили військову основу дипломатії, наступної технічної зустрічі. Ми працюємо, щоб зустріч відбулася якнайшвидше. Наш український інтерес – не затягувати війну, але бути готовими до будь-якого розвитку ситуації. Світові очевидно, що саме Росія винна, що війна досі триває. Україна готова до максимально швидких кроків, реального припинення вогню, встановлення нової архітектури безпеки.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin claims he has ordered the military to create a security buffer zone along Russia's border with Ukraine. Putin says the zone would stretch across the Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod regions. A move that Ukraine's foreign ministry calls further proof that Russia is not interested in peace. Ukrainian officials say the buffer zone should be confined to Russian territory and that Putin's statements undermine efforts to achieve a ceasefire. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has named a new domestic security chief, openly defying the country's Attorney General. In a statement, the Prime Minister's office announced the appointment of Major General David Zini as the next head of Shin Bet, Israel's domestic intelligence service. The decision comes just one day after the Israeli Supreme Court ruled the dismissal of current Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar was unlawful. Israel's Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara had previously warned Netanyahu not to proceed with any new appointments, citing a potential conflict of interest. Following the announcement, the Attorney General said that the appointment process was flawed. Israel's main opposition leader, Yair Lapid, urged Major General Zini to reject the appointment until the Supreme Court rules on its legitimacy, accusing Netanyahu of acting under a cloud of conflict of interests. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.